Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Hopelessly Gifted podcast. I'm your host, Mark Talaga. Today, we're going to tackle a pretty important question today. Why can't my kid get started, right? Or why can't I get started? It's a pretty relatable question. So, we're going to dive into the task of initiation, what it means to really begin something and get going with something. This, like most things we work with these gifted kids, is more complicated than you think. It's not simple as, willpower and just get your butt up and move and just go do the thing and you'll be happier when you get there and all this kind of stuff that we typically try to use to coax our kids into a place where they're beginning something. We want to understand it with a lot more depth so that when we are faced with the challenge of how we help somebody get started or how we get started ourselves, we have a clearer framework of what we need to assess for and evaluate. So I'm going to use the example of getting started in writing a paper. This is a pretty common challenge with a lot of gifted people. Putting something from your brain into words, onto paper, to turn it in for hopefully a good grade or, whatever you get from it. So we got to look at a few things first. One is some of the defenses that come up when initiation is being too much of a demand on us. The most common things you hear is I'm a procrastinator or I'm a perfectionist. Both of these things are symptoms. They are not the problem. They are not character traits inherent to who the person is. And you can tell this because typically it doesn't exist across the board for them. If there's something you ask them to do and it's something they enjoy or have a high level of expertise in, all of a sudden initiation isn't really a problem. They're not procrastinating then. They're not being a perfectionistic then, right? They're not being a perfectionist then. So you've got to ask yourself, why in certain cases do we procrastinate? And do we feel like, oh, we have to be a perfectionist around it? In the case of writing, you have to have a few things in mind. First and foremost, you really need to have a framework for how you're going to write. You actually need a framework for anything you're going to initiate. Even if it's something as simple as, I'm going to get the mail. Well, you have to have a framework. I'm going to stand up. I'm going to go outside. I'm going to look in the mailbox. I'm going to grab it. I'm going to bring it back in and I'm going to set it down. Now, for some people, it's like, no duh, that's pretty easy. But you can see this a lot in gifted kids around sometimes seemingly simple tasks, right? Go get ready for the day. Well, they know how to get ready. They've done it a million times. I've helped them do it. They know what they're doing. But more often than not, when you have a kid that's struggling to initiate on something, you can really evaluate, do they understand the framework by asking them to walk through it step by step? What are the steps? What do you have to do in order to do this thing? And you can find pretty quickly that a lot of kids will miss little things, or they'll skip over steps, or they'll assume they can do part of the task. And your job is to help them recognize where those little glitches are. Oh, I see. You're assuming you know how to do X, Y, and Z, right? You're assuming you know how to, just answer the question about the year Abraham Lincoln was born. You feel like, oh, I'll just know how to do that. But do you have that information in your head? Is it easily retrievable? Or is it something you'd have to look up, and so on and so forth? I'm giving you very simplistic examples. Trust me, I know it gets a lot more complicated than this. But when it comes to writing a paper, framework is really, really interesting because most gifted kids will tend to write a paper by feeling like they know a lot about the topic or even feeling like they have something they want to say. But when it comes to putting words to paper, there's a freeze moment. I don't know how to get started. I can't initiate. Typically, what you're dealing with is a problem of retrieval. They can't go into their brain and, in an organized way, retrieve the information to put it onto paper. And so, a lot of times, with writing at least, initiation's more about organization. Okay, well, let's have them do an outline then, right? That helps them get organized. But even that might be tricky. And so you got to go back a step further. Okay, well, they're having trouble putting an outline together. Okay, well, did they effectively comprehend and process the information that they're supposed to write about in the first place? Maybe that's the issue. Maybe they haven't really read through and processed effectively the source material of what they're writing about. And so sometimes you've got to go back farther and farther and farther into the process to see where the glitch is in the framework, where they're making assumptions about what they can do rather than what they know they really need to do. So sometimes when kids have a writing problem, it's not really writing, it's actually a reading problem, surprisingly. Because they have difficulty in processing the material in the first place in an organized way, they can't really pull it out. Let me give you an example. Um, Sometimes, and I don't know if teachers do this much anymore, but a lot of times after like a big long break, teachers will go through the simple assignment of, okay, I want you to write about what you did on your break. And for some kids, they'll sit there and they won't write anything. And the teacher will go over and say, well, I know you did something on your break. Just tell me anything. Tell me anything you did. But here's the problem. Some kids go into their break and are able to retain everything. They can go through it chronologically, share it with you, or they can recall the highlights. Other kids, if they don't know that they're going to need to retrieve that information later, don't take any time to process what they're doing on the break. Now, if they were told, hey, when you go into your break, know that you're going to come back and you're going to write about the break, that may give kids a better framework for knowing how to go into a moment saying, oh, this could be something I'm going to write about. Whether they do that consciously or unconsciously doesn't really matter. But if they have no ability to process the source information, nothing's going to come out when it's writing time. And so again, what this appears to be is an issue with initiation. Oh, just get started. And sometimes, yeah, that can help. If they just power through, they start writing, all of a sudden their retrieval kicks in and things are coming up and they remember things, or teachers can give them prompts and then those prompts lead to recollections of the things they experienced, and then writing happens. But at the source of the issue, it's still processing. Did they take it in the first place? Assuming that they did, and they have an organized sense of, yes, here's what I wrote and here's what I want to write about. And now I can put it into an outline form in an organized way. And then I can go about writing. Well, sometimes. And other times, there's still an issue with initiation. They can't write, even though they have an outline right in front of them. Now, this is where I feel like the people that struggle with this the most are actually the best writers, because they have a vision of how they want it to sound and how they want it to look, but they can't really execute at the level that they see it in their heads, even with the outline next to them. And so there's some issue with prose or their writing style, or I don't know, grammatical errors, or issue with how they organize language in the first place. All of this, again, leads to a lot of demand on the prefrontal cortex, the part where your executive function is housed, and makes it so you can't get moving. And so, again, you have to deal with all of these variables if you really want to understand where the initiation problem is. For some people, it's a really painful process to write something that is not very good right off the bat. They don't like to deal with the idea that they have mediocre writing ability for a first draft, and that it's more about the rewriting that is going to help them make it good enough for how they envision it in their heads, right? So it's an emotional process as well. And if you learn anything from us in this podcast, learn this. When your anxiety goes up, your processing goes down, always. And so if you have an emotional task in front of a kid like writing, where they really want to do a good job, they inherently know they're a good writer, but they just can't get it out on the paper, their anxiety might be so high that they have no ability to tap into these frameworks that they know work for them. So you also have to deal with the emotion and the mood. It's not just solving one thing. It's not just, oh, we'll bring their anxiety down, now they can write. You still have to assess for all the other steps in the process. Even the goal of the writing assignment has to be made clear for some gifted kids. Well, the goal is to write about your favorite vacation. Well, I don't have a favorite vacation, and so I can't do the assignment. Well, that's okay, little Timmy. Why don't you just write about any vacation? No, the assignment says it's got to be my favorite vacation, and the teacher will know, right? They get really inflexible and rigid because they're over relying on their ability to just follow the instructions and provide what's necessary, rather than deal with the idea of how do you evaluate what makes something a favorite vacation? What makes something a better vacation than another, right? Going through a process of talking that out sometimes gets kids clear enough to where they understand what it is they're writing about. Now, if you put all these issues together and lump them all in one big pile, you're just met with this freezing or running instinct, right? Your flight or fight or freeze kicks in. And so because they can't extrapolate all the little nuance and pieces and frameworks and what the goal is really about and what they really need to do, it just becomes a big ball of feeling and they run away from the demand. And then, unfortunately, for some kids, they learn in this example to hate writing. I don't like writing. Writing's no fun. I don't enjoy it. I'm not a writer. When in reality, they might have the potential to be an excellent writer if they would just learn these areas of what it takes to write or what it takes to initiate something and get started. And so, whenever you're working with gifted kids, or whenever you're working with yourself, by the way, you're really trying to help them more formally assess on a more complex level where the glitches are. Now, to throw even more fuel onto this fire, we sometimes have kids that have learning difficulties, expressive language issues, or language processing issues, or dysgraphia, or dyslexia, any number of things that can be thrown on top of it that make any one of these steps in the process even more difficult. And it's not just about solving the dysgraphia, that's just one part of it. We have to look at each and every part. What makes it so challenging and painful is more not about, oh, I just want to write something good and I can't. It's more like I don't even know where to start. And I don't know myself why I can't do it. And sometimes I can do it. Or if it's creative writing, I have no problem because there's less structure and rules to it. But when it comes to recalling information and then organizing it and then writing it in a style that's my own voice, I just can't get started. So when you're really looking at the task of initiation in anything, whether it's getting ready for school or writing a paper, you've got to look at all these steps. Do they really understand the framework? Do they really understand what the goal is? Do they really understand how to ask for help when they need it? And when they do ask for help, do they know what they're asking for? And do they have people in their life that understand the level of challenges related to their desire to do it really well? So, Andy Mahoney, my mentor, is his claim to fame is this phrase: fear is desire. And a lot of times when we start to pick up on the fact that a child or ourselves are afraid to get started on something, there's fear in it. We have to remember that on some level, it's desire. They really want to do it and they want to do it well, but they don't know what it takes to do it well. An example I use all the time in my counseling sessions is you have a kid who's maybe playing tennis and, they hit the ball and it's a mishit. It goes out of bounds. And the kid throws his racket down, starts to tear up, goes and sits in a corner and doesn't want to play anymore. The normative response to that is, hey man, it's just one shot. No big deal. Let it roll off your back, to minimize the idea that it mattered that much. When what we should be doing is saying, I could see how badly you wanted to hit that shot. And let me tell you what skill you would need to focus on in order to do it. So I'm going to help you with that, right? We have to go back to skill. It's not so much about the psychological mindset of what it takes us to start things. We have to look at the skill as well. And as we know, notoriously with gifted kids, they're so smart, they're so bright, they're so quick that we make the assumption all the time that they have the skill when maybe they don't, or they have it, but not in this context, or it's underdeveloped. And so, in addition to knowing our frameworks and the goal and understanding what our vulnerabilities are, we have to put it all together to really help the kids pinpoint the micro skills that need to be developed. Now, I'm not guaranteeing that if you do all this, they'll suddenly write and it'll be no problem. But I'll say it, guarantee that you will have more flexibility and understanding from them. They will start to realize the problem is not this moral failure of I just can't get started and I just don't care and I'm lazy and I'm not a good writer. They'll see that it's way more complicated than they even thought. Giving them that freedom can help quite a bit. And that's where you start. You start with helping them say, you know what? I'm learning through the Hopelessly Gifted podcast, the best podcast on the planet. Just kidding. That this is a more complicated issue than I even realized. And I can see how hard it is for you to get started. And you can take initiation just as an example. You can look at any other executive functioning skill, transitioning. transitioning from one thing to another. They're really locked into something they want to do, and now they have to transition to something else. That's a skill just as well. It needs a framework just as well. It needs a goal just as well. And we need to understand the vulnerabilities and the emotional aspect just as well. So the idea is, if we can better understand that what we're trying to develop in these gifted kids is a skill, then we are better able to help them figure out what they need. Now, here's something I'm going to warn parents to not do, that some parents do all the time. They try to convince their kids. So I'm going to let that sink in for a minute. Have you ever tried to convince your kid to do something? No, this is good for you. It's something you'll need to learn later on in life. Oh, it's so important that you learn how to do this. Or this is the healthier way to go about it. Or if you do this, you'll get a big prize at the end of the day, right? We do a little, bribery as well. No harm in that, by the way. But the idea is we try to use our high-level reasoning skills to convince them that what they're trying to do is important, rather than align with them where they are and saying, oh, I didn't realize how hard this is, or how difficult this process is that you're engaging in, or how much this matters to you. If you start there and keep it as the kid's issue, not yours to solve for them, again, you have a better chance of creating more understanding. Your kid will listen to you better, and there'll just be a better back and forth about how you can solve the issue. But if you start to take ownership of the issue because you're getting anxious, and how many of you out there get anxious when your kid doesn't perform well or isn't doing their homework or can't get started on stuff? And so you start to, over function for them and try to do everything for them to make it okay and just basically pull them through. Again, not a problem on some level. As long as you understand, hey, where they're at developmentally, this is the kind of support they need, rather than I'm so frustrated and I'm so stressed out and it feels like a battle every time. That's what I'm trying to have you avoid. I don't want getting a kid started on something to feel like a power struggle, or that you have to outsmart them and convince them, because it won't work. These kids will run you around, ragged. I always tell these kids when they come in here, I'm like, I am going to assume you're smarter than me. So I'm not going to be able to outsmart you and convince you or trick you into doing something. What I am going to do with you is help you understand why it's as hard as it is. And that's where we start. We use our relationships to help kids take ownership of the problem, to take ownership of their own development and growth, and to understand it's more complex than they think it is. Well, all these other kids can do it. That's fine. Good for them. But you are your own person, and we have to understand your unique struggles with whatever it is you're trying to get started on. A lot of kids, remove that part. So I could go into a million different directions about all the different executive functioning things, like how to keep a kid, connected to a task and sustain them, and how much accountability matters, and all the different things you kind of need. But again, that would be 10 other podcasts. So, I guess I'll have to do 10 more podcasts. But for today, I really want you to focus on what it takes to initiate, on how difficult it is, and how you can talk to your kids or to yourself to better understand where you might be missing something, where the glitch is in the process. And when you have stronger frameworks and you can maintain the anxiety and you can emotionally regulate through that, you can be okay. Now, for a lot of kids, they may need more support. They may need somebody to write out something that they're dictating to them. I don't care if they write it out in pencil, they type it out, on the computer or their iPad, or they use Dragon Speak and it turns into text for them. I really don't care how it is, because at the end of the day, it's about, can we help them better express themselves? Can we meet them where they are? And then can we create supports around that, because they're willing to accept the supports because they understand the actual challenges in place with the developing the skill. So when you talk to your kids, around any task that you can sense that they're, showing the symptoms of procrastination or perfectionism, start weaving in some of this understanding. Help them realize, hey, you know what? I'm realizing there's way more to this than I thought. And so we've got to really take a step back and understand where in the process things are falling apart. Is it the emotion? Is it the goal? Is it the framework? Is there a vulnerability we're not getting a sense of? Or is it D, all of the above? I hope this is helpful for you. I'm sure there's so many more questions, but on some level, if you feel a little more understood or understand the problem better yourself, then things get a little better. I tell people that's all therapy really is. It's small incremental changes over time. It's not these huge, magic, insightful moments and their life's changed forever. That's more what Hollywood wants to show you. Or that happens after months or years of work that culminate into a full integration of all the things you've been learning. But when you're trying to help your kids develop this skill, it's slow and steady, and it's supposed to be a little uncomfortable, both for the kid and for you, the helper, parent, teacher, whoever. Know that going in. And understand that when you, as the parent, start getting a little more stressed or a little more anxious, or you're worrying about it more than the kid, that's part of the problem. It shouldn't be that way. It should be you coming back to your foundation of working with your team, other teachers, other helpful people, other parents, whomever, to say, okay, what am I missing here? Because I'm still having a hard time helping my child advocate for themselves and navigate this difficult thing of getting started. And so I guess my last piece of advice to you is just get started with this conversation, right? Easy as that. But what I wanted to give you today is the framework, the goal, the emotional understanding, and to check your vulnerabilities as well. There's a lot more I can say about it, but as always, reach out to us with questions, thoughts. We're here to communicate with you. This podcast is for you. So feel free to ask us anything that you feel would be helpful to you, and I'm sure it'll be helpful to a lot more people. Thanks. Bye-bye.